this is what we make disabled people do is just astonishing.
This is Therese Coffey, and she is a UK politician, and she's got an uncanny resemblance to Peter Griffin. Now that might seem a bit cruel to make that comparison, but there is good reason as to why I'm being that evil towards her. She has said some really awful stuff on TV, and it's just going to get worse. Wait till you see towards the end what I'm going to tell you about what she's withholding from the public. Let's start off with her comments towards Marcus Rashford, a footballer who plays for both Manchester United and England. In 2020, Rashford started a campaign using Twitter and obviously his social media profile to encourage the government to actually extend the school meals project, something that he had deep in his heart.
When you were growing up, do you remember being hungry?
Yeah, of course. But I also understood. Maybe it was just part of me growing up. I just knew how hard that my mum was working. Anyway, so, you know, I'd never moan, I'd never do anything. If there's food on the table, there's food on the table. If there's not, I had friends that understood my same situation. And maybe it was possible for me to go to their house, get some food or whatever.
The campaign was a success, and on the right hand corner, which I'll zoom in now, you'll be able to see all the places that extended its free school meals, all because of Rashford's pressure on the government. As stated earlier, part of that pressure was through tweets, and this is what Marcus Rashford said. When you wake up this morning and run your shower, take a second to think about parents who have had their water turned off during lockdown. Make the U-turn. Therese Coffey wrote, water cannot be disconnected though. And there was quite a response to this from the media.
Therese Coffey, who's the Secretary of State, replied, water cannot be disconnected though. What the hell kind of reaction is that?
As well as Susanna Reid and Piers Morgan.
That's her response.
That's so tone deaf.
She's a government cabinet minister. That is her response to Marcus Rashford. That's what she had to say. No empathy, no attempt to understand, no attempt to support him.
However, Rashford got his own back by saying, I'm concerned this is the only tweet of mine you acknowledged. Please put rivalries aside for a second and make a difference. Number 2 on our list is a belter. Therese Coffey comes out in the middle of COVID and announces that the reason as to why the death rate is one of the highest in the world at that point in the UK is because of the aged and the fat.
Some of that will be recognising the age of our population. Some of that will be recognising the obesity of our population.
This was interesting because throughout the pandemic, whenever an MP had come on TV, they denied any reason as to what had caused the pandemic to be so bad in the UK. And instead they said it's best to wait for the report to come out. However, as you just heard, Therese Coffey has just blamed old people and fat people for such a high death rate.
Listen, I applaud you for giving us some reasons, because none of your...
that's the first time we've heard a government minister settle on a couple of explanations.
Right, none of your colleagues last week could give us any, so you've given us 2 now.
Take note of the body language. She looks quite perplexed that she's actually said what she said on TV and is seemingly stuttering her words, sort of mumbling to herself, as I think the epiphany has just dropped that she has just blamed the aged and the fat for the high death rate in the UK. Piers Morgan goes on to completely destroy her during the interview as a result of her comments.
Ageing population and obesity. So are you saying that the reason for us having the worst death rate in the world is because of the public? They're too old and they're too fat?
I think that's a very insulting thing that you've just said.
You just said it.
You
just said it. Sorry, what did you find insulting, Ms. Coffey? Out of interest, what did you find insulting? You said 2 reasons.
And in order to get out of this complete and utter mess that she's created for herself, she bails on the interview.
Unfortunately, I have to go to other broadcasters as well. And I wish that we'd had more time when we were.
Well, you can come back anytime. We haven't seen you.
I appreciate that.
I haven't interviewed you since May, so you can come back anytime. It was you that boycotted the programme, right? So please don't play. Please don't play the "you haven't given me enough time" card, because we gave you 8 months and you didn't turn up.
This is number 3 on my list, and I'm not going to make you suffer the awful scene. Therese Coffey is seeing the time of her life an hour after new legislation kicked in, cutting £20 a week off benefit claimants. Now this is where it becomes a little bit more serious, and unfortunately for a lot of people out there, they are not getting the help that they need, and the reports that are needed to investigate this are not going to be released. The letter you have in front of you has been written by Stephen Timms. He's a politician, and he's the chair of the Work and Pensions Committee. The letter is an interesting read because it's from Therese Coffey and explains why she will not be releasing any of the documents and investigations. First was the reduction to the benefit cap. That's the coffee karaoke taking place on the night of the reduction. She cites the reasons for not releasing that document is the fact that Boris got sacked, and on top of that, that there's been a global pandemic, and so it wouldn't be appropriate to release that. The next investigation was into unpaid carers, and in the UK, the numbers are quite staggering. According to the charity Carers UK, 1 in 8 adults, 6.5 million people are carers. Every day, 6,000 more people take on a caring responsibility, equaling about 2 million a year. 1.4 million provide over 50 hours of care. 1 million people care for more than one person. But that's not one of the scariest figures. The scariest figure is the number of child carers caring for their parents. 800,000 without any support. Question 4, paragraph H asks, what are you going to do to help safeguard the vulnerable? And there are some recommendations as to what they're doing, but the opening sentence is probably the most disturbing. We do not have a statutory duty of safeguarding, though of course we do care about our claimants, but we offshore that to other organisations to deal with. The next question was, will the department publish the report on how effective its support is for vulnerable people claiming universal credit? And it says a very odd sentence, that it can't release a document because it might prejudice to effective conduct of public affairs. So it's essentially saying if it releases the information, it will affect the ability of that office to operate. Now, that seems to mean almost anything. Does that mean it'll be physically attacked? Will the government close down the department because it can't operate correctly? What does that mean? I'd love to know if there are any lawyers out there listening to this. Point 7 is about benefit sanctions, which is really interesting because within that paragraph it justifies the sanctions by saying the notion of a sanction acts not only through its imposition on a claimant, but importantly also through its effect as a deterrent. So essentially what they're saying is they're happy to use this deterrent because it acts like a stick to beat people into submission. It also uses the same sentence, if they release the document, which they won't, prejudice to effective conduct of public affairs. To me, I'm reading it, if they release that document, they're in a lot of trouble. The final point, point 8, is about work capability assessments, and essentially that is to assess whether or not you are able to work.
Dr. Wood alleges the assessments for the employment and support allowance are unfair and unethical. He claims he was instructed to change reports. He says that medical knowledge is twisted, and he says the system is skewed against the claimant.
Unfortunately, for a lot of people that go through the assessment, it is humiliating, nerve-wracking, and a lot of people do not even intend to go to the meeting. They avoid it, meaning that they're punished as a result. There are horrendous stories about people who've gone to the work capability assessment. The impact that it has had has affected their lives permanently, with large numbers of suicides taking place. But we don't have exact figures, but according to some charities, it's as many as 3 people a day are committing suicide as a result of the work capability assessment. She states that there are no statistics available, and there probably won't be in the future because there are fewer resources available to a department. And why might there be fewer resources? ITV might have the answer for you.
£443 million since 2013. Research by the charity Scope suggests 200 million of that was when PIP or employment support allowance had been wrongly denied. In total, 1.2 million decisions were overturned.
Here's the experience of one claimant who actually had to take it all the way to court. Have a listen.
The tribunal is horrendous. It was a court of justice. It was me in front of a judge. The fact that this is what we make disabled people do is just astonishing. For me, I associated being in court with having done something criminal.
And why might this be? It's quite simple. It's what Piers Morgan says. She's got no empathy. And it's stuff like that was in that letter and from the other examples I've given you. That's why I feel it's appropriate to be just this mean. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Therese Coffey and all the stuff that she's done in the past. I mean, it's just unbelievable that she's in charge of the Department of Working and Pensions. On that note, I still want to say thank you to all my YouTube supporters and my Patreon supporters. You help this channel grow and keep on going. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.